The night was cold in the Gobi Desert. Stars filled the sky like scattered diamonds on black cloth. Deep inside the underground observatory, Dr. Una Park stared at her computer screen with tired eyes. She had been working for 16 hours straight. Her coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. "Go home, Una," said Tae-ho Kim from across the room. He was her assistant, a young man with messy hair and kind eyes. "The stars will still be there tomorrow." Una shook her head. "Something is different tonight. I can feel it." Tae-ho laughed softly. Scientists were not supposed to talk about feelings, but he knew Una. She had instincts that were almost never wrong, so he stayed with her, watching the data scroll across their screens. The observatory was one of the most advanced on Earth. It was the year 2187, and humanity had spread across the solar system. There were colonies on Mars, mining stations in the asteroid belt, and research bases on the moons of Jupiter. But Earth was still home, and this observatory, buried deep beneath the desert, listened to the universe. At exactly 3:47 inches the morning, everything changed. The computers began screaming. Warning lights flashed red. Data poured across the screens faster than Una could read. She jumped from her chair and ran to the main console. "What is happening?" Tae-ho asked, his voice shaking. "A signal," Una whispered. "Something is coming through. Something big." The signal was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was not radio waves. It was not light pulses. It was something else entirely, buried beneath layers of cosmic radiation like a message hidden inside a storm. The frequency was impossible. Human technology was not designed to receive it. The only reason they caught it was because of a small error in their equipment. A mistake that became a miracle. Una worked through the night and into the next day. Then the next. She forgot to eat. She forgot to sleep. Tae-ho brought her food and made her drink water, but she barely noticed. All she could see was the signal. It took her 5 days to decode it. When she finally understood what it said, she sat back in her chair and felt tears roll down her cheeks. "It is a cry for help," she told Tae-ho. "Someone out there is dying. They are begging for rescue." The message was written in mathematics, the universal language. It spoke of a world called Nuvara, a planet circling a dying star far beyond human reach. The people of this world, the Keth, were facing extinction. A terrible plague was killing them slowly. They had sent this signal into the void, hoping for salvation. But here was the strange thing. The signal was not meant for humans. It was addressed to a species called the Valori. According to the message, the Valori were ancient beings of immense power. They had protected the galaxy for thousands of years. The Keth believed the Valori would hear their cry and come to save them. Una searched every database on Earth. She found no record of the Valori. If they had ever existed, they were gone now. The Keth were calling for heroes who would never answer. She brought her discovery to the United Earth Council. The great leaders of humanity gathered in a massive hall in Geneva to hear her speak. She showed them the signal. She played them the cry for help. She explained what it meant. The council was divided. "This is not our problem," said one leader. "These Keth are strangers. We have never met them. We owe them nothing." "The journey would take months," said another. "The cost would be enormous." "And for what? To save creatures we do not know? We do not even know if this is real," said a third. "It could be a trap." Una listened to them argue. Her heart grew heavier with each word. She had hoped humanity would rise to the occasion. She had hoped they would choose courage over fear. Then a voice spoke from the back of the room. "I will go." Everyone turned to look. A man walked forward through the crowd. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face marked by years of hard service. His uniform bore the insignia of the Earth Defense Fleet. His name was Commander Junho Baek. "The signal may not have been meant for us," Junho said. "But we received it. Someone out there is dying, and asking for help. If we ignore them, what does that make us? The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Commander Baek, said the council president, you would risk your life for strangers? Ah, Junho smiled slightly. Is that not what heroes do? The council argued for 3 more days. In the end, they could not order the mission. But they could not stop volunteers either. Junho was given command of the starship Horizon's Edge, a vessel designed for deep space exploration. He was allowed to choose his own crew. He chose carefully. For his pilot, he selected Hana Choi. She was young, barely 30 years old, but she could fly anything with an engine. Her skills were legendary. Some said she could make a ship dance between stars. For his engineer, he picked Do-hoon Lee. Do-hoon was a quiet man who spoke more to machines than to people. But there was nothing he could not fix. Give him scrap metal and wire, and he would build you a miracle. For xenobiology, he asked Minji An to join. Minji had studied alien life forms her entire career, even though humanity had never made contact with any. She had theories and dreams. Now she would have a chance to prove them. For communications, he chose Sun Woo Yoon. Sun Woo was a genius with signals and codes. If anyone could talk to the Keth, it would be him. On the day of departure, Yuna came to see them off. She stood at the edge of the launch platform, watching the Horizon's Edge prepare for its journey. The ship was beautiful, silver and sleek, built for the void between stars. Junho walked over to her. Thank you, he said. Without you, we would never have heard them. Yuna smiled through her tears. Bring them hope, Commander. That is all I ask. Junho nodded. He turned and walked up the ramp into the ship. The doors closed behind him. Minutes later, the engines roared to life. The Horizon's Edge lifted off the platform and climbed into the sky. Yuna watched until the ship was nothing but a tiny light among the stars. Then, she returned to her observatory, sat down at her console, and began listening once again. Somewhere out there, a dying world was waiting. And for the first time in their history, humans were answering a call that was never meant for them. The crew of the Horizon's Edge did not know what they would find. They did not know if they could help. But they knew one thing, with absolute certainty. They could not ignore a cry for help. That was simply not who humans were. 7 months in the void of space can change a person. The crew of the Horizon's Edge learned this truth as they traveled farther from Earth than any human had ever gone before. They crossed distances that made the mind dizzy. They passed dead stars and empty worlds. They saw wonders that no human eyes had ever witnessed, but they also felt the loneliness. Space was cold and silent. There was no sun to warm them, no sky to comfort them. Only the endless dark and the distant lights of foreign stars. Junho kept his crew busy. Every day, they trained. They studied the Keth language that Sunwoo had pieced together from the signal. They prepared for anything and everything. But in quiet moments, doubt crept into their hearts. What if we are too late? Hana asked one night as she sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the stars. What if they are already dead when we arrive? Then we will bury them, Junho replied. And we will tell the universe that someone cared enough to try. Hana looked at her commander. In his eyes, she saw no doubt, only purpose. She nodded and turned back to her controls. If Junho believed, then she would believe too. On the 217th day of their journey, Nuvara appeared on their screens. It was a world wrapped in storms. Thick clouds covered the entire planet, swirling in angry patterns of gray and black. Lightning flashed constantly, lighting up the atmosphere like a war zone. Even from orbit, they could feel the danger radiating from the world below. The atmosphere is toxic, Minji reported, reading her instruments. High levels of ammonia and sulfur. We cannot breathe down there. The signal is coming from the surface, Sunwoo said. A large structure near the equator. That must be their capital city. Junho stood at the center of the bridge, arms crossed, studying the dying world. Prepare the shuttle. We will use environmental suits. Do-hun, make sure the life support systems are working perfectly. We cannot afford mistakes. The shuttle descended through the storms. Hana gripped the controls as wind threw them left and right. The craft shook and rattled. Alarms screamed warnings. But Hana did not panic. She wrestled the shuttle through the chaos with steady hands and iron will. They broke through the clouds and saw Nuvara for the first time. The planet was dying. That much was clear immediately. Cities of strange design dotted the landscape, but most of them were dark and silent. Fields that had once grown crops were now brown and dead. Rivers had turned to sludge. The air itself seemed sick, heavy with poison and despair. The capital city rose from the ground like a desperate prayer. Tall spires reached toward the sky, built from a material that glowed faintly purple. Once, it must have been beautiful. Now, it looked like a grave. Hana landed the shuttle at the edge of the city. The crew stepped out in their environmental suits, weapons ready, hearts pounding. They did not know what to expect. The Keth found them first. They emerged from the buildings like ghosts. Tall and thin, with bodies covered in hard shells of pale blue. They had 6 limbs, 4 for walking and 2 for grasping. Their heads were triangular, with large compound eyes that reflected the dim light. They moved slowly, as if every step caused pain. Junho raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "We are from Earth," he said, speaking the Keth words that Sun Wu had taught him. "We received your signal. We have come to help." The Keth stared at him. They did not speak. They simply stared with those massive eyes, and Junho could see something in them that hurt his heart. Disappointment. An elder emerged from the crowd. He was larger than the others. His shell cracked and faded with age. When he spoke, his voice was like wind through dry leaves. "You are not the Valori." Junho shook his head. "No. We are humans." The elder studied them for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. "We called for giants. We called for beings of power and light. Instead, we receive small creatures with soft skin and fragile bones." Minji stepped forward, unable to stay silent. "Help us." The elder's voice carried nothing but despair. "Look at us. Look at our world. A plague is killing us. Our children die before they can walk. Our cities crumble. We needed the Valori. We needed gods." He pointed at the humans with a trembling limb. "You are prey species. What can you possibly do?" The crew stood in silence. The words stung like knives. They had traveled so far, sacrificed so much, and now they were being told they were worthless. But Minji refused to accept it. "Take me to your sick," she said. "Let me study the plague. I am a scientist. I may not be a god, but I know how to fight disease." The elder, whose name was Tivok, looked at her with tired eyes. "You waste your time. Then let me waste it," Minji replied. "What do you have to lose?" Tivok considered this. Finally, he nodded and led them into the city. What they saw inside broke their hearts. Thousands of Keth lay in medical wards, their bodies covered in dark patches, where the plague was consuming them from within. Healers moved among them, but they had no cures. They could only offer comfort as their people died. Minji got to work immediately. She collected samples, studied cells, analyzed data. She worked without rest, barely eating, barely sleeping. The Keth watched her, with confusion. Why was this small creature working so hard for strangers? Do-hun found his own purpose. The city's power systems were failing. Without power, there was no clean water, no heat, no light. He gathered his tools and disappeared into the depths of the infrastructure. The Keth engineers followed him, curious about this quiet human who spoke to machines like they were old friends. Within 2 days, Do-hun had restored power to half the city. Lights flickered on in buildings that had been dark for months. Clean water flowed again through pipes that had been clogged with disease. The Keth watched in amazement. Hana took the shuttle up through the storms again and again, mapping the planet, finding safe zones where the atmosphere was cleaner. She found underground caves that could shelter refugees, mountain peaks where the air was less toxic. She flew through conditions that would have killed most pilots, and she did it with a smile on her face. Sunwoo worked on communications. The Keth had lost contact with their other cities when the plague struck. He rebuilt their network piece by piece, reconnecting communities that had been isolated for years. Families heard the voices of loved ones they thought were dead. Hope began to spread like a small flame in the darkness. Elder Tivok watched all of this with growing confusion. "I do not understand you," he said to Junho one evening. "You are small. You are weak. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no powers. By all logic, you should have died long ago on your own world. How did you survive?" 2000. In C1, Junho smiled. "We are stubborn. We refuse to quit. But why help us? We are not your people. You gain nothing from this." Junho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "On our world, there is a saying. When someone cries for help, you answer. It does not matter who they are. It does not matter what they look like. If they need help, you help them. That is what makes us human." Tivok looked at the small commander with new eyes. Perhaps, he thought, he had misunderstood what strength truly meant. Days passed. Weeks. The humans worked, without stopping. They did not complain about the poison air or the constant storms. They did not despair when progress was slow. They simply kept going, one step at a time, one problem at a time. And slowly, very slowly, things began to change. The plague still spread, but Minji was learning its secrets. The city still crumbled, but Do-hun was holding it together. The world was still dying. But for the first time in years, the Keth began to feel something they had almost forgotten: hope. The Valori never came. The gods never answered. But something else had arrived. Something smaller, weaker, softer. Something that refused to give up. Minji had not slept in 4 days. Her eyes were red and burning. Her hands shook from too much caffeine and too little rest. But she could not stop. Not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. She stood in her makeshift laboratory, surrounded by samples and data screens, and she finally understood. The plague was not natural. She ran through the corridors of the medical center, her boots echoing on the stone floors. She found Junho in a meeting with Elder Tivok, discussing supply routes and refugee movements. Both looked up when she burst through the door. "The plague," Minji gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "It was made. Someone created it." Tivok's compound eyes went wide. "What do you mean, created?" Minji held up a datapad showing her findings. "The genetic structure is too perfect, too targeted. This is not a natural disease. It was engineered to attack Keth biology specifically. Someone built this plague as a weapon." The room went silent. Junho felt a cold anger rising in his chest. Who would do such a thing? Tivok's voice was barely a whisper. "The Shal? Who are the Shal?" Junho asked. Tivok sank into his seat, suddenly looking older than ever. "They are an empire. A great and terrible empire that spans hundreds of star systems. They do not conquer worlds through war. That would be too wasteful. Instead, they weaken their targets first. They release plagues. They destroy infrastructure. They make civilizations collapse from within. Then, when the population is dying and helpless, they arrive to harvest whatever resources remain." Do-hun and Hana had entered the room, drawn by the commotion. "Everything," Tivok said. "Technology, minerals, knowledge, and slaves. The Shal take whatever has value and leave nothing but ashes behind. They have done this to countless worlds. Now they are doing it to us." Sunwoo ran into the room, his face pale. "Commander, I just intercepted a transmission. Ships are approaching Nuvara. Multiple vessels. They will arrive in 3 days." Junho closed his eyes. 3 days. They had 3 days before an alien empire came to finish what the plague had started. "How many ships?" he asked. 12, Sunwoo replied. "Warships, heavily armed." The crew looked at each other. The Horizon's Edge was a research vessel. It had some weapons, but it was not built for battle. Against 12 warships, they would last maybe 5 minutes. "We should leave," Hana said quietly. "There is still time. We can escape before they arrive." No one responded. Junho stood very still, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. He thought about the Keth he had met over the past weeks, the children who had shown him their drawings, the healers who worked themselves to exhaustion trying to save the sick, the engineers who had followed Do-hun with such hope in their eyes. He thought about Elder Tivok, who had called humans weak and small, who was now looking at him with something that might have been trust. "We stay," Junho said. Hana stared at him. "Commander, that is suicide." "Maybe," Junho admitted. "But if we leave, every Keth on this planet dies. Every single one. Men, women, children. They all get harvested by an empire that sees them as nothing more than resources." He looked at his crew. "I did not cross the galaxy to run away when things got difficult." Do-hun nodded slowly. "What do you need me to build?" Hana closed her eyes. Then she smiled. "You are crazy, Commander. But I guess that is why I followed you." She cracked her knuckles. "Tell me how to kill a warship." Minji spoke up. "I can finish the cure. If I have 2 more days, I can stop the plague. The Keth will be strong enough to fight alongside us." Sunwoo was already working on his datapad. "The Shal communications are not well encrypted. I can break into their network, feed them false information, make them confused." Elder Tivok listened to all of this with growing amazement. Junho smiled. "We are humans. We have done more, with less." Over the next 3 days, the crew of the Horizon's Edge worked like they had never worked before. Do-hun tore apart everything he could find. Old Keth war machines, rusted from centuries of disuse, debris from ancient battles, even broken household items. He welded and wired and hammered and built. When he was done, the Horizon's Edge bristled with weapons that should not have existed. Cannons made from Keth technology, missiles created from mining explosives, shields reinforced with materials never designed for combat. "It is ugly," Do-hun said, looking at his creation. "But it will work." Hana spent hours in the simulator, practicing maneuvers that should have been impossible. She studied the recordings of Shal attack patterns that Sunwoo had stolen from their communications. She learned their weaknesses, their blind spots, their habits. "They think in straight lines," she told Junho. "Everything they do is predictable. They have never faced an enemy who fights differently." "Then we will fight differently," Junho said. Sunwoo worked his magic on the Shal network. He sent false messages about reinforcements coming from the other side of the galaxy. He made them believe the plague had killed all the Keth already. He created confusion and doubt and fear in their ranks before they even arrived. Minji finished her cure on the 2nd day. It was not perfect. It would not save those who were already too far gone, but it would stop the plague from spreading further. It would give the Keth a future. She distributed the cure throughout the medical centers. Within hours, the sick began to recover. They rose from their beds for the first time in months. They looked at the human woman with tears in their eyes. "How can we ever repay you?" one of them asked. Minji shook her head. "Help us fight. That is all I ask." The Keth who could stand gathered weapons. They were not soldiers. They were farmers and teachers and artists. But they were willing to die for their world. And that made them dangerous. On the night before the battle, Junho called a meeting. Keth and humans gathered together in the great hall of the capital city. The room was full, thousands of beings standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear what the human commander would say. Junho climbed onto a platform so everyone could see him. He looked out at the crowd, at the mixture of blue shells and pink skin, at the blend of compound eyes and human eyes. All looking at him, all waiting. "Tomorrow," he said, "an empire comes to destroy you. They have done this to many worlds. They expect easy victory. They expect you to be weak and helpless." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They do not know that humans are here. They do not know that we have rebuilt your weapons. They do not know that your people have been cured and are ready to fight. They come, expecting prey. They will find warriors." A murmur ran through the crowd. "I will not lie to you," Junho continued. "Many of us will die tomorrow. The Shal are strong. They have numbers and firepower. But we have something they do not. What is that?" Someone called from the crowd. Junho smiled. "We have nothing to lose. And that makes us the most dangerous creatures in the universe." He raised his fist into the air. "Tomorrow, we show them what the weak can do when they refuse to surrender. Tomorrow, we teach the Shal the true meaning of fear." The crowd erupted in cheers. Keth and humans together, shouting defiance at the stars. It was a sound that echoed through the dying city and rose into the storm-covered sky. Somewhere in space, 12 warships approached. Their commanders were confident. They had done this countless times before. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Shal fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like shadows sliding out of nightmares. 12 warships, each one massive and black, covered in weapons designed to break worlds. At the head of the formation flew the command ship, the largest of them all. Commander Vorith stood on its bridge, watching the dying planet on his view screen. "Status report," he ordered. His officers checked their instruments. "The plague has done its work, Commander. Population reduced by 60%. Infrastructure failing. No significant power readings." Vorith smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Another easy harvest. Signal the fleet to begin landing operations. I want collection teams on the surface within the hour. Under 2-3. His communications officer suddenly looked confused. "Commander, there is a transmission coming from the planet. It is addressing us directly." "What?" The view screen flickered, and a face appeared. A strange face. Soft skin. 2 eyes. It was a creature Vorith had never seen before. "Attention, Shal Fleet," the creature said. "This is Commander Junho Beck of the human starship Horizon's Edge. The planet Nuvara is under our protection. Turn back now, and you will be allowed to leave in peace. Continue forward, and you will be destroyed." For a long moment, there was complete silence on the Shal bridge. Then Vorith began to laugh. It was a harsh, ugly sound that echoed through the command center. "What is this?" he asked between laughs. "What is a human? I have never heard of such a species." His officers searched their databases. "We have no records, Commander. They appear to be unknown." Vorith laughed even harder. "One ship. One tiny ship crewed by creatures so insignificant, we do not even know they exist. And they dare to threaten us?" He waved his hand dismissively. "Destroy them. Then proceed with the harvest." 3 Shal warships broke formation and moved toward the horizon's edge. Their weapons powered up, ready to reduce the human vessel to dust. In the cockpit of the horizon's edge, Hana gripped her controls and smiled. Junho sat in the commander's chair, watching the approaching ships. Hana nodded. "Making them chase me is my specialty." The Shal fired. Massive energy beams lanced through space, enough power to destroy a small moon. But the horizon's edge was not where they expected it to be. Hana had already thrown the ship into a spin, dodging between the beams with movements that defied physics. "What is she doing?" one of the Shal captains demanded. "Ships do not move like that." Hana flew like she was dancing. She wove between the warships, too fast and too unpredictable for their targeting systems to track. The Shal were used to enemies who fought in straight lines, who followed logical patterns. Hana followed no patterns. She flew on instinct and madness and pure human creativity. Sunwoo. Now. Junyu ordered. Sunwoo activated his jamming system. Suddenly, the three Shal ships lost contact with each other. Their communications filled with static and false signals. They began to panic, firing blindly into space. Two of the ships shot at each other by mistake. Their shields flared and sparked. One of them took critical damage to its engines and began to drift. "What is happening?" Vorith screamed from his command ship. "What are they doing to us?" No one could answer. They had never faced anything like this before. On the planet's surface, Junho's ground forces waited in the ruins of a Keth city. Dohun had turned the city into a fortress, filled with traps and hidden weapons. The Keth warriors stood alongside him, armed with whatever they could carry. "They are coming," Dohun said, watching the sky. 6 Shal transport vessels descended through the clouds, carrying thousands of soldiers. They expected no resistance. They expected easy prey. They found hell waiting for them. The moment the first transport touched down, Dohun triggered his traps. Explosions ripped through the landing zone. Buildings collapsed on top of Shal soldiers. The ground itself seemed to fight against them, opening into pits and tunnels that swallowed them whole. The Shal soldiers who survived the initial chaos found themselves in a nightmare. Keth warriors appeared from everywhere and nowhere, striking quickly and vanishing before the enemy could respond. They used their knowledge of the city, every secret passage, every hidden corner. And Dohun was always watching, always adjusting, always finding new ways to hurt the invaders. "They are not fighting like a dying civilization," a Shal officer reported to Vorith. "They are fighting like demons." Opla. In space, the battle continued. Hana had led the 3 pursuing ships on a chase around the planet. She knew she could not destroy them with firepower. The horizon's edge was too small, too weak for direct combat. But she could outthink them. She flew into the planet's storm system, diving into the thick clouds where sensors were useless. The Shal followed her blindly, convinced they could catch the small prey. They did not see the trap until it was too late. Hana had led them directly into the path of each other. When she pulled up at the last moment, 2 of the Shal ships collided. Their hulls cracked and shattered. Explosions tore through both vessels. Only one ship remained, and it was damaged and alone. "Fire everything," Junho ordered. Dohun's improvised weapons roared to life. Missiles and energy beams struck the damaged Shal ship from every angle. It tried to retreat, tried to escape, but Hana would not let it go. She chased it down like a wolf hunting a wounded animal. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Commander Vorith watched in disbelief as 3 of his warships died. 3 warships destroyed by a single tiny vessel crewed by creatures he had never heard of. "All ships, focus fire on that vessel," he ordered, his voice shaking with rage. "I want it destroyed now." The remaining 9 warships turned their attention to the horizon's edge. Even Hana could not dodge that much firepower. They had to change tactics. "Retreat to the dark side of the planet," Junho commanded. "Use the moon for cover." Hana pushed the engines to their limit. The horizon's edge shot away from the Shal fleet, disappearing behind Nuvara's moon, just as enemy fire scorched the space where they had been. "Status report," Junho said. "We have minor damage," Dohun reported. "Shields are holding. Weapons are still operational. They cannot follow all of us at once," Junho realized. "The fleet is too big. They have to split up or move together." Sunwoo was already working. "I am sending false signals, making them think we have reinforcements coming from the other side of the system. If they believe it, they will divide their forces." It worked. Vorith, paranoid and confused, sent 4 ships to intercept the fictional reinforcements. That left only 5 ships, hunting the horizon's edge. The battle raged for 3 days. Hana flew without sleep, surviving on adrenaline and determination. She led the Shal ships into asteroid fields and solar flares. She used every trick in the book, and invented new ones. One by one, she whittled down the enemy fleet. On the ground, Dohun and the Keth fought like legends. They gave no ground. They asked no quarter. Every street became a battlefield. Every building became a fortress. The Shal had never faced anything like this. They were used to weak, dying civilizations that collapsed at the first sign of force. But these defenders did not collapse. They did not surrender. They did not stop. On the morning of the 4th day, Commander Vorith looked at what remained of his fleet. 8 ships destroyed. His ground forces decimated. His soldiers terrified and demoralized. And still that tiny human ship flew through the stars, defiant and unbroken. "This is Commander Vorith to all Shal forces," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Retreat! We are leaving this system." The 4 remaining warships turned and fled. They jumped to faster than light speed and vanished into the darkness. But before they left, Vorith sent one final message to the galaxy, a warning to anyone who would listen. There is a new species, small and weak in appearance. They call themselves humans. Do not underestimate them. Do not engage them. They do not fight like prey. They fight like the stars themselves are on their side. Avoid their territory. Avoid their allies. Avoid them at all costs. The message spread across Shal, space, and beyond. Species who had never heard of Earth suddenly knew the name. Empires that had never considered humanity now spoke of them with fear. On Nuvara, the storms began to clear for the first time in decades. The Keth looked up at their sky and saw something they had not seen in generations. Stars. And somewhere among those stars, a tiny ship called the Horizon's Edge floated in victory, crewed by 5 exhausted humans who had done the impossible. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Nuvara. The world was changing. The storms that had covered the planet for so long were finally breaking apart. Sunlight, real sunlight, touched the surface for the first time in years. The Keth stepped outside and turned their faces toward the warmth, tears streaming from their compound eyes. Children who had never seen the sun laughed and played in the golden light. Minji's cure had spread through the entire population. The plague was dying. Every day, fewer Keth showed symptoms. Every day, more rose from their sick beds and rejoined the living. The hospitals that had been filled with the dying were now filled with the recovering. Dohun had rebuilt half the capital city. Power flowed through the streets again. Clean water ran in every home. Factories that had been silent for decades hummed back to life, producing food and medicine and hope. Hana had trained a new generation of Keth pilots. They would never fly quite like she did. But they were good. They were brave. And they would defend their world if the Shal ever returned. Sunwoo had connected all the Keth cities into one network. Families that had been separated for years were reunited. Communities that had thought they were alone discovered they had neighbors. The planet was healing, one connection at a time, and Junho had become something he never expected to be. A symbol. The Keth told stories about him. They painted his face on murals. Children played games where they pretended to be the human commander who stood against an empire. He was uncomfortable with the attention, but he understood why they needed it. They needed heroes. They needed proof that hope was real. On the last day before the Horizon's Edge was scheduled to depart, Elder Tivok called for a ceremony. The entire capital gathered in the Great Hall. Thousands of Keth standing shoulder to shoulder, all facing the stage where the 5 humans stood. Tivok walked forward slowly. He was old and tired, but something in his eyes had changed. The despair was gone. In its place was something warm, something alive. "When we sent our signal into the void," Tivok began, his voice carrying through the silent hall, "we called for the Valori. We called for ancient gods of power and light. We believed only such beings could save us. He paused and looked at the humans. We were wrong. The crowd listened in perfect silence. The Valori were powerful. Tuvok continued. They could move stars and shape worlds. If they had come, they would have saved us with their might. They would have crushed the Shah like insects. And we would have bowed to them. As servants bow to masters. He turned to face the crowd. But the Valori did not come. Instead, we received humans. Small creatures. Soft creatures. Beings with no natural weapons. No armor. No special powers. By every measure, they were weaker than us. Tuvok's voice grew stronger. And yet they saved us. Not with power. Not with might. They saved us with something greater. They saved us with will. With courage. With a simple refusal to accept defeat. He walked to Junho and placed a thin hand on the commander's shoulder. The Valori would have saved us as gods save the helpless. You saved us as equals. You showed us that strength is not about power. It is about heart. It is about standing up when everyone tells you to lie down. It is about fighting when everyone tells you the battle is already lost. Tuvok reached into his robes and pulled out a small object. It was a medallion, carved from the same glowing purple stone as the city's spires. Ancient Keth symbols covered its surface. This is the Star of Nuvara, Tuvok said. It is the highest honor our people can give. It has not been awarded in 3,000 years. We give it to you now, Commander Junho Bake, and to your crew. You are Keth now. You are our family, forever. He placed the medallion around Junho's neck. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the walls. Junho felt his eyes grow wet. He had expected nothing when he set out on this journey. He had only wanted to help. Now, he was standing in front of thousands of beings who called him family. It was overwhelming. Thank you, he managed to say. But we did not do this alone. Your people fought beside us. Your healers and engineers and warriors. We only showed you what was already inside you. The courage, the strength, the refusal to give up. Those were always yours. Tuvok smiled. It was an expression Junho had never seen on a Keth face before. Perhaps. But you reminded us they were there. The ceremony continued late into the night. There was food and music and dancing. Keth and humans celebrated together. Two species that had become one family in the fire of shared struggle. But the next morning, reality returned. Sunwoo came to Junho with a look on his face that the commander knew well. Something was wrong. What is it? Junho asked. Sunwoo handed him a datapad. I have been scanning the galaxy, looking for other signals, other cries for help. Junho looked at the screen. His heart stopped. There were hundreds of them, hundreds of signals scattered across the stars. Distress calls, pleas for rescue, desperate messages sent into the void by dying civilizations. Some were old, centuries old. Others were new. But they all had one thing in common. They were all unanswered. The galaxy is full of them. Sunwoo said quietly. Species calling for the Valori. Species calling for anyone. No one ever comes. Junho stared at the screen for a long time. Each signal was a world. Each world was filled with people like the Keth. People who were dying. People who were losing hope. People who had given up believing that anyone cared. He thought about what Tuvok had said. About how humans had reminded the Keth of their own courage. He thought about the Battle of Nuvara. About 5 people. And 1 ship. Standing against an empire. He thought about all those unanswered calls, echoing through the cold emptiness of space. Show this to the crew, he said finally. We need to talk. An hour later, the 5 humans gathered in the cargo bay of the horizon's edge. Sunwoo projected the map of signals onto the wall. Hundreds of tiny lights, each one a cry for help. This is what is out there, Junho said. Worlds dying alone because no one answers. No one comes. The Valori are gone. The ancient protectors are dead. The galaxy has no heroes anymore. He looked at his crew. At Hana, who flew like the wind. At Do-hun, who could build miracles from scrap. At Minji, who had cured an entire planet. At Sunwoo, who could crack any code. Unless we become those heroes. Hana was the first to respond. You want to answer all of them? There are hundreds. Not all at once, Junho said. We go home first. We tell Earth what we found. We build more ships. We train more crews. We create a fleet. Not for war. For rescue. For hope. Minji nodded slowly. It will take years. Decades. Then it takes years, Junho said. Every journey starts with a single step. The Keth sent one signal. We answered. Now we know there are more. Do we ignore them? Do we go back to our safe little lives and pretend we never heard? Do-hun shook his head. That is not who we are. No. Junho agreed. It is not. Before they left Nuvara, Junho sent a message to Earth. He told them everything. The Keth, the Shawl, the plague and the battle, and the victory. And then he told them about the signals. Yuna Park received the message in her observatory. She read it with shaking hands. When she finished, she sat back in her chair and looked up at the ceiling. He wants to save the galaxy, she whispered. Teho stood beside her. Can we do it? Can humans really do something that big? Yuna smiled. Before Junho left, I would have said no. But now, I have seen what 5 people can do. Imagine what millions could accomplish. Gone. Gone. She stood up and began making calls. To governments, to scientists, to anyone who would listen. The message spread across Earth like wildfire. Humanity had found its purpose among the stars. On Nuvara, the Keth watched the horizon's edge lift off into the sky. They stood in the sunlight, waving goodbye to the small creatures who had become their family. Elder Tivok whispered a prayer as the ship disappeared into the clouds. Go well, humans. The universe needs you. And now, thanks to you, we know that there is hope. Hope for everyone. In the cockpit of the horizon's edge, Junho looked at the star map one last time. Hundreds of lights. Hundreds of cries. Hundreds of worlds waiting for someone to care. Set course for Earth, he said. Hana engaged the engines. The ship leaped toward the stars. Behind them, Nuvara shrank to a tiny point of light. Ahead of them, the galaxy stretched infinite and cold. But it would not be cold forever. The signal had never been meant for humans. But they answered anyway. And they would keep answering until every cry was heard, every world was saved. And every corner of the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity had arrived, and they were not going anywhere.